Hey Em, how's it going?
Hi, Craig. Sorry, writing notes. Very
Yeah,
excited for today's conversation. You know, it's close to
just
my heart.
just jumped off a plane from Adelaide, and so a little bit crusty. But I think we're going to talk about copy copyright copyright today, um,
Yeah.
and AI because it's a hot topic, especially with a lot of creators in Australia coming out and advocating for protection of their intellectual property very strongly. And so it's interesting. And also, there's some interesting news out of the US that's been happening as well.
With Sora.
I hadn't even got onto Sora, actually. Yeah, you've done some prep on Sora. What did you find on Sora? Because yeah,
Oh, I think it's really interesting because, from my perspective as a songwriter, I always sort of copyright as the way that I organize words that everyone in the world has and notes that everyone has into an order that is original to create something that my audience will connect with and want to participate in. So, in writing a song, which is my context with copyright, I'm organizing the ideas and the words and the music into something that's entirely original. And while humans are wired to create, we are creative beings. As an artist who's invested a lot and had a lot invested in me in developing the skill set to be able to write a song, copyright is the way that we are remunerated as artists to enable us to continue to do that at a very high standard. And if we are not remunerated for it, then it's devalued, but it also our ability to support ourselves as artists is diminished. Like it's already hard enough to make a living as an artist. If you take away copyright, that's actually probably the most unknown but biggest earner for a lot of artists. So when you look at an artist like Beyonce, she'll get her name as a credit on a song because her profile is so big that by her singing a song, it will become a hit. But you'll see that there's a whole bunch of other names on that song as well, and they're the people that wrote it before she sang it. And you've got artists like Katie Tunstall, Adele, Amy Winehouse. These were all people that wrote their own songs and often just on their own, or there was a writer called Egg White, E.G. White, who did a lot of writing with them back in that era in the UK. And, you know, same with Ed Sheeran. These are all artists that have become renowned, not and affluent or wealthy, not just because they're getting paid for their performances. So as an artist, you get paid for your performance, but they're also getting paid every time their song gets played. And that amount is multiplied by the number of seats that are in the house you're playing to. So if I play at a pub, you might get five, but I used to get like £5 a gig if you play maybe 5 songs. But if you play Royal Albert Hall, you can make thousands of pounds
yeah.
if one of your songs is played at Royal Albert Hall because of it's multiplied by the number of seats in the venue, is my understanding. So um, this is something worth fighting for because with back to Sora, what
Sora's a
that's
video, so
one more time.
Sora's about video, so it's
Exactly. So what Sora's talking about is actually the person's face or the characters that they create as something that's copyright, which I hadn't thought about before. So people are creating like Mario Brothers characters or the McDonald's icon characters, and when they're then being used in videos that are not um
endorsed.
approved of by the people who created them, the creators of those characters are not getting paid for the use of their work or their which is what copyright is. So I hadn't really thought about how copyright then applies to a person's face or a person's creations in regard to characters. And I think that this is a really interesting conversation because my concern is even though they've shifted their position in the last week from you've got to opt out to we're not going to show them. I don't fully understand. I feel like there's a lot of intellectual tech jargon in a lot of the writing about it. So maybe you can shed some light on this. But
Yeah.
um, I feel like whichever way this is being done in terms of the protection of copyright within these apps, it's putting the onus back on the artist to be in a defensive position and uh, saying to issue cease and desists or issue um, like flag an issue with the tech company where tech company goes, oh, yeah, okay, fine, we'll take it down. But it's really putting it back on the artist to kind of police the use of their work, as opposed to the tech companies or the governments protecting artists and saying, well, there's a rule here that using other people's ideas without crediting them is not okay.
I
Um,
think it's quite clear, like in like if you're generating video that is ripping off characters, I think that would be something that you can see quite clearly. But then
but
it's
who's going to flag it, right?
yeah.
If you're saying to the creator of that character, well, we're going to use it unless you tell us not to. We can't control how people are using our platform. That feels like a bit of a cop out, because it's going to be whack-a-mole. Like, no
Well, there's also
content creator has the resources to police that as
um,
expensively as it's going to be needed to be policed to prevent the use of their
because
work.
because it's not always black and white, due to the nature of generative AI, and generative AI is trained on these large corpuses of data which have copyright in it.
Hmm.
But then what comes out the other end is kind of like sort of a big pea soup of all the weights and training data that's come in. Then you can say, like, give me something that looks like say Mickey Mouse as the obvious copyright character that keeps getting well, you could say, create me a mouse with black round-ish ears, and you could describe it and come out the other end. But then
But then I think the onus should be on the creator of that AI to describe a mouse with big ears, as opposed to being able to use Mickey Mouse. Mickey
yes,
Mouse is a copyrighted name, and yeah. So
yeah.
okay, I've got a question for you. Here's a noob question. You're training these large models, and they choose what the tech company can choose what they train them with.
Yeah,
Once something's been scraped or like harvested or whatever the word is,
that's
scraped is
respect.
correct,
Yeah.
to be integrated into the learning of these models. Can it be unlearned, or is it once it's in there, and you can't take it out?
um, you'd have to go back and start again. So a lot of
But
these,
that's not going to happen. They're just going to upgrade it. They're never going to start again.
uh, yeah. For example, and there's different nuances to copyright law in Australia versus the US, and
Mhm.
so the US has this concept of fair use, where here we call it fair something else. I made a note of it. Yeah, we call it something else. But fair use over there is sort of open for interpretation, and
Uh-huh.
it allows their organisations to use copyrighted material and then argue their case whether it's fair use. Where in Australia, it's very much these are the things you can use copyrighted material for. So, for example, if you were going to use a copyrighted character, but you're going to use it for satire,
Hmm.
perhaps that's okay in Australia and New Zealand if you're like
Well,
making.
unless you're an Olympiad who decides to do the bunny hop and call it the kangaroo, and then someone writes a musical about you, because that's not okay. That got shut down.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, but Barty the musical. No, what's the name of the lady who did the
I
kangaroo?
don't know what the hell you're talking about. I haven't had much sleep. You can't just
Hang
kangaroo.
on.
Yeah,
Um, please hold, listener.
no, I'll keep.
Um,
But like, so this is, for example, the Anthropic did there's a big settlement in the US, Anthropic, and the details of that use case were that it was found that using copyrighted material that they'd actually paid.
Ray Gun. Breaking the musical. A woman got sued because she wrote a musical about Ray Gun, or Rachel Gunn, the break dancer from the Olympics, and she wrote a satirical musical about her, and Ray Gunn sued her, and that's when the market really. I think Australia was like very. I think the world was very embracing of Rachel Gunn.
I thought it was
She- yeah, it was ridiculous, but there was really
like,
good energy around it until she started to get precious about it, and then this woman wrote a satirical musical about her, and Ray Gunn sued her. And the thing is with satire, um, sh there's a rule in media that you always punch up, you don't punch down. So Ray Gunn's got the stage, she's making money out of the appearances and whatever. Maybe she's embittered that she's not making money out of the musical, but a woman writes a musical satiring the whole situation. but she's an unknown musical writer from Melbourne. And so Ray Gunn suing her and shutting down the musical that ended up having to be rewritten is punching down. And so that's where the tide turned against her socially.
Yeah, look, uh, yeah, copyright law in Australia and other places is quite different. And I think that's why there's the big argument in
Yeah.
Australia at the moment, because um, uh, the the artists in Australia are trying to argue that there's no change to the copyright law at all. Actually, if I play the tech side of the conversation,
Mm.
um, uh, if if technology companies, startups in Australia had some way of accessing all of Australia's creative output, they could innovate and build really cool AI solutions and models as well. And so,
So what
so
solutions to what? Models for what?
um, so you could build foundation models that understand Australia's cultural um, uh, history, cultural.
Nah,
What's the
not
what's
buying it.
uh,
How about we have conversations about our culture
no?
and get humans to talk about
Thing
it?
is, this is the other argument. So the Productivity Commission in Australia has said that we should look at changing this because it would unleash AI innovation, which would be stopped if we just stick with the current rules. There's a third way where they say you come up with a new
Well,
sort of
just pay the
way of,
people whose content you use, and then you can have it.
yeah, that's kind of what the middle ground is. The
That
people
seems
say
reasonable to me.
we could come up with a way of saying, yeah, you're allowed to use the content, but you've got to pay them. But you don't have to pay
The
them.
the other side of copyright, though, is that it gives the artist some level of control about how their work's used, and I think once it goes into these large language models that have or large learning models, the artist would have or the content creator would have no control over how their work is being used, and I think that's really disconcerting. The example that I read, I can't remember in which paper, was that if, um Taylor Swift had no control over how her songs were being used or how her visage was being used, that wouldn't fly. So why are we expected to be okay with it for other artists?
Yeah, I think it's a vexed conversation. It isn't
Mm.
clear in black and
There's
white.
no one way. We're gonna figure something out, and I think the market will figure it out long before government does because they're scrambling, they don't know what to do with it, and at the end of the day, the tech companies are a lot more agile and have more resources to move faster than anyone else, so I think the genie's out of the bottle, the horse is bolted. What I do think is interesting though, and, you're talking about words a second ago, um, how they're different in America and Australia. One word that I noticed in almost all of my reading of the media around this in Australia is the word theft.
Yeah,
And I think that's really interesting because the media has the ability to shape perception around an issue. Like I think, the last couple of American elections can really show us the role that media plays in both creating a blind spot for how we perceive the world around us and also how it can move social media as well can move people. And I think the use of the word theft hasn't been used in other countries. I didn't see it in the UK or the America or the Norwegian media, which is the other ones that I read. But in the Australian media, there was a lot of the use of the word rather than learning models using or um, learning from that use theft of artists' ideas. So I think that's a really loaded word. I do think it's particular to the middle to left wing media, but I think it's interesting to see that word being used in the description of how
yeah,
tech
that's
companies are utilizing copyright because it is at the end of the day they're stealing someone's idea for their profit without paying the person they took it from.
yeah. I think that's my part of the argument that if we change it and make it too permissive for tech companies, that a lot of the benefits flow to overseas tech companies.
Mm.
That and it doesn't flow to Australians or it doesn't flow to the Australian creators. Uh,
Yeah.
I I think I think the Australian government said that I don't think they're planning on changing it, and I like
But
I
how do you enforce it, right? No, so few of these artists have actually got the resources to enforce it.
yeah, you need some kind of regime, some sort of body that tracks this thing, or some way that people that are building AI systems could license or some way remunerate artists in a way that
Right.
that is mutually agreed. If that makes
Yeah.
yeah, and
I'm conscious of the time. I do have I want to wrap up my perspective on this with a little bit of optimism. I know that I've been a little bit pessimistic about this because I do despair, but I do think that there's hope in that humans want to do good things. So are you across what's happening with AGL? Just to take a little of a left-hand turn right now. Are you across
right.
what's happening with AGL? Okay, so
AGL, you mean the utilities company?
yes.
Okay.
So 10% of that company has been bought up by an Australian tech billionaire, and they had their AGM last week. And it was basically it's on a number of occasions now been hijacked by the fact that this billionaire, this very high profile Australian tech billionaire, has bought up 10% of this company. And so now that's quite a hefty amount. He's now the largest shareholder. And so he's able to influence the way the company's um, behaving to the extent where he's been able to compel them or influence them to move the green agenda faster and things like that. And so my thought on this is these tech companies and their founders end up with such colossal resources. So that's one thought stream. Watch where they intersect. Also, we're all starting to observe the enshittification of things. And the enshittification, if you've missed it, is where basically everything's becoming shit. And
Yeah.
humans fundamentally, though, have a desire for high quality things to engage with. And ultimately, AI can only create as good as stuff as we put into it.
Yeah.
So if at the end of the day we get to a point where AI is a component in the enshittification of art and humans are the ones that can create high quality, masterful, creative things, if we have here people with resources and we have here people who say at the end of the day, this mass produced sludge is fine, but we still have a desire for high quality, masterful content. Maybe eventually they intersect and these guys say, we're going to step in and do something about the culture to preserve a world where we understand it takes investment and money and resources to train these artists into their craft and to provide them with the resources to create good music, good film, good art. That doesn't just happen in a vacuum. That takes education, that takes, paints cost money, instruments cost money, music lessons cost money. And so maybe there'll be an intersection. And that's going all the way back to how things were in, the 1700s, where you had like this idea of noblesse oblige, or the people that had the money invested in the creative ones to ensure that a high standard of artistry endured.
Yeah.
So
Have a
that's the thing that I hope
factor.
happens here is that on some level we still preserve a high standard of artistry and the development of quality, masterful arts and craft, like the craft around art and music and film and
I
all
think
the things that we enjoy to consume as human beings.
I think there's something innate in humans that like to create, like to struggle against systems, and that's where creativity comes from. And also AI is going to provide a lot of people with useful tools for creativity. So I think one of I suppose we should really wrap up.
Yeah, we're so over time.
The one thing I did learn that when I was looking at this, which I didn't realize, is that AI outputs aren't covered by copyright in the research. So if you create something with an AI system or a hybrid, the bits that a human created can be copyrighted, but the bits the AI system created can't be copyrighted at the moment. So that's
That's so this is the thing. I think at the end of the day, just watch this space, because we can talk a lot of hot air, but we don't know where this is going. And it's one of those things where we've just got to watch and see how it plays out. But that's a really interesting point, that you don't own whatever you create. If you use AI, you only own the component that you contributed to it.
Yeah.
Which is a whole interesting conversation around K-pop and music and who owns the songs and rabbit hole.
Good time to be a lawyer.
If you're a copyright one.
Yeah.
Okay, mate. I'll catch up with you soon. Next week, I'll be recording from the airport because I'm heading to South by Southwest.
Yay.
Yeah. See you there. Bye.
Yeah.